She had always been surrounded by quiet sounds, the rustle of leaves outside her window, the soft hum of the city far away, and the gentle tick of the clock in her small room. Music had always felt like a friend to her, a secret companion that waited patiently for her every thought and feeling. As a child, she would sit for hours at the old piano in the corner, her fingers barely reaching the keys, pressing one note at a time. It was clumsy and slow, but in those moments, she felt a connection that went beyond words. She wasn't just hitting notes. She was speaking to herself in a language that no one else could understand. Her first memories of music were intertwined with her family. Her parents were not professional musicians, but they loved to listen. The soft melodies of classical music would float through the house on weekends, filling the rooms with warmth. She would sit quietly, listening, her small fingers moving as if they were trying to imitate the sounds in the air. It was never about performance. It was about feeling. Even as a child, she knew that music had the power to calm, to excite, and to express what words could not. Growing up, the piano became her refuge. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by the noise of life outside, she would retreat to the corner of the living room where the piano stood. Sometimes, she would play softly, barely audible, as if she were afraid to disturb the air around her. The notes were delicate and slow, like a gentle conversation between her and the instrument. There was a particular pleasure in finding the perfect note, the one that felt like it fit exactly where she wanted it to. Each chord was like a step on a journey she was taking alone, yet she never felt lonely there. School life brought its own challenges. She was quiet and often overlooked in the crowd of more outgoing children. She found it difficult to speak up in class or to share her thoughts in group activities. But when she returned home and sat at the piano, all of that faded away. The music gave her a voice, a way to express emotions she could not put into words. Each practice session was not just about learning a song. It was about discovering a piece of herself, a truth that no one else could touch. Her parents noticed her dedication, though they never pressured her. They offered encouragement in quiet ways. A gentle smile when she mastered a difficult piece, a nod of approval when she practiced with care. They understood that her talent was growing naturally, like a flower opening in its own time. They never forced her to compete or perform. Instead, they allowed her to explore her own pace, to find comfort and confidence through her music. As she grew older, her practice sessions became longer and more focused. She began to experiment with different styles and pieces, trying to understand how various sounds could evoke different feelings. A simple melody could make her feel serene and calm, while a more complex piece could bring excitement or tension. She learned to listen deeply, not just to the notes she played, but to the emotions they carried. Her fingers became more confident, moving across the keys with a grace that surprised even her at times. Despite her growing skill, she remained reserved about showing her talent to others. The thought of playing in front of people made her stomach tighten and her hands shake. She worried about making mistakes, about losing control of the music, about the inevitable judgment that came with being seen. She preferred the comfort of solitude, where her mistakes belonged only to her, and her successes were her private victories. Occasionally, friends or neighbors would ask her to play, and she would reluctantly agree. At first, she played softly, careful not to draw too much attention. But sometimes, in those small moments, she would let herself get carried away, her fingers moving faster and more confidently than she expected. The listeners would notice the sudden brilliance in her playing, the way she could make the piano speak as if it had a soul. She would retreat quickly afterward, embarrassed by the attention, yet secretly thrilled by the acknowledgement. Her room became a sanctuary where imagination and reality merged. She would close her eyes and imagine performing in grand halls, with hundreds of people listening, hanging on every note. In those moments, she felt powerful and free. She imagined her fingers dancing across the keys, producing sounds that moved people deeply. Yet, even in her dreams, she never forced herself to perform before she was ready. Patience was part of her process, as much as practice itself. She also learned to observe life closely, seeing inspiration in ordinary moments. The way sunlight filtered through the window in the morning, the laughter of children playing outside, the rhythm of rain against the roof. These small details found their way into her music. She began to compose simple melodies that reflected these observations, little stories told through sound. It wasn't just about playing existing music. It was about creating something that carried a piece of her experience, a reflection of the world as she felt it. Her connection with the piano was not only technical but emotional. She understood that music was more than notes and rhythm. It was a way to communicate feelings that could not be captured in words. She learned to pour her joy, her sadness, her hope, and her fear into every piece she played. Over time, her music began to carry a depth that people could feel, even if they didn't fully understand the person behind it. Each performance, even in solitude, was a conversation between her and the world. Through these years of quiet practice and careful exploration, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt more confident in expressing herself, not just through music but in small ways in her daily life. The patience and focus required to master the piano began to reflect in her attitude toward challenges outside the music room. She learned to trust her instincts, to appreciate small successes, and to approach difficulties with a calm determination. And so, she continued, day after day, learning and growing in her own time. Her world revolved around music, not for recognition or fame, but for the simple, profound joy it brought her. It was in this slow, gentle way that she built the foundation for something remarkable. The quiet beginnings, the careful exploration, the private triumphs. They all prepared her for a moment that she did not yet know would change everything. She could not imagine yet how the soft melodies she nurtured in solitude would one day fill a room with power and emotion, leaving everyone who heard them in awe. Even on ordinary days, she felt the pulse of possibility. Every note she played was a small step toward something greater. She knew the journey was long and the path uncertain, but she also knew that the piano was not just an instrument. It was a key to discovering herself. With every practice session, every delicate note, and every experiment with sound, she was slowly shaping the story of her own talent, readying herself for a day when the world would finally hear her true voice. The invitation arrived unexpectedly, quietly slipped under the door like a secret waiting to be discovered. She held the card in her hands, feeling a mix of curiosity and nervousness. It was a small gathering at a local community center, just a handful of people, and someone had asked her to play the piano. Her first thought was hesitation. Public performances had always made her uneasy, and she had spent so many years perfecting her skill in private that the idea of playing in front of others felt both thrilling and terrifying. Yet, something inside her whispered that this could be the moment to take a small step outside her comfort zone. She began preparing carefully, just as she always did. Her practice room became alive with her presence for hours each day. She would sit at the piano, imagining the small audience waiting to hear her music. She focused on the opening notes, making them gentle and inviting, a soft touch that would ease both her and those listening into the performance. She went over every chord, every pause, ensuring each one was deliberate. Even though the room was empty, she imagined faces, attentive eyes, and she imagined the subtle changes in her own expression as she moved through the music. On the day of the event, she arrived early, her hands trembling slightly, though her heart was steady with determination. The community center was warm and welcoming, with sunlight streaming through the windows, reflecting softly on the wooden floor. People were chatting quietly, arranging chairs and decorations. The piano sat at the front, gleaming under the light. It seemed to call to her, a familiar companion waiting to share her story with others. She took a deep breath and approached it slowly, her fingers hovering over the keys, as if greeting an old friend. The audience gathered gradually. A few faces she recognized, friendly neighbors and casual acquaintances, smiled at her encouragingly. She nodded politely, feeling the weight of their expectation without letting it overwhelm her. The first few moments were tense, her fingers moving carefully, producing notes that were soft and deliberate. She played as if she were telling a story, each phrase a gentle sentence meant to ease the listeners into her world. She could feel the slight rustle of the audience as they settled in, leaning forward to catch each note. As she continued, a change began to occur within her. The initial nerves started to melt away, replaced by a quiet confidence. She realized that the music itself was guiding her, that the piano was not a tool to impress but a voice that expressed what she could not say with words. She let herself breathe with each note, feeling the rise and fall of the melody, and slowly, she began to explore the range of sound she had practiced so many times in solitude. Her fingers moved with a lightness that surprised her, delicate yet purposeful, capturing the emotions she had felt for years. The audience began to notice something subtle. At first, it was just curiosity, the way they tilted their heads, listening more intently. Then came appreciation, the gentle smiles and soft murmurs of recognition. She could see people leaning into the music, some closing their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Each note she played was no longer just an exercise in practice. It was a bridge connecting her inner world to theirs. She felt a thrill of excitement, a new energy that she had never experienced when playing alone. It was as if the room itself was alive with her music, responding to her, moving with her. She experimented carefully, allowing the music to grow naturally. A soft passage here, a subtle crescendo there, each choice deliberate, yet flowing freely. Her fingers danced across the keys with increasing assurance, creating layers of sound that felt rich and vibrant. The gentle introduction she had planned was giving way to something more expressive, more alive. She noticed the small gasps and smiles from the audience, and it gave her courage. The music was no longer confined to her own imagination. It had taken on a life of its own in the space around her. During a particularly quiet moment, she paused, her fingers hovering just above the keys. She felt the room holding its breath with her, the silence almost sacred. Then, with a soft exhale, she began again, this time allowing herself to stretch the melody further, to explore subtle variations and unexpected harmonies. Each note carried emotion. Each chord spoke of the experiences she had lived in quiet reflection. The audience seemed mesmerized, drawn into the narrative she was crafting with her music. She could feel the connection deepening. Every glance from a listener, every small movement in the room, told her that she was not alone in this journey. The music became a conversation, not just between her and the piano, but between her and everyone present. She played with intention, letting the rhythm ebb and flow like a story being told for the first time. The initial tension melted entirely, replaced by a sense of joy and freedom. She realized that she had been carrying this moment within herself for years, practicing in solitude, learning patience, and understanding the subtleties of expression. The gentle introduction that had been her plan had transformed into a quiet revelation. She had begun with caution, with careful attention to softness, but now the performance was alive with authenticity. Her hands moved more fluidly, her posture relaxed, and her entire being was immersed in the music. The audience responded naturally, their engagement sincere, their reactions a mirror to the emotions she poured into every note. It was not about perfection or technique alone. It was about truth, honesty, and feeling. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Minutes felt like hours, yet in the flow of music, she barely noticed. She was present, fully engaged, responding instinctively to the sound she created. The room held an energy that was both intimate and expansive, a rare quality that she had only ever imagined. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of herself, capable of conveying joy, sorrow, wonder, and peace all at once. When the final notes faded into silence, there was a moment of stillness. The audience remained quiet, as if reluctant to break the spell. Then came the gentle applause, soft at first, then more enthusiastic. She allowed herself a small smile, her hands resting lightly on the keys. A warmth spread through her, not from praise, but from the realization that she had shared a part of herself, that the music had communicated more than words ever could. For the first time, she felt the true power of her talent, the way it could touch hearts beyond her own. Afterward, people approached her with kind words, expressing how moved they had been. Some admitted they had never felt so connected to a piano performance before. She listened, grateful yet modest, feeling a quiet pride that she had accomplished something personal and profound. The experience was not about fame or recognition. It was about courage, about stepping into a space that had once seemed intimidating and finding that she belonged there. It was a small, meaningful victory that would remain with her long after the gathering ended. Walking home later, the streets seemed different, as if the world had shifted subtly in response to her performance. She thought about how she had begun softly, carefully, almost hesitantly, and how the music had grown into something alive and expressive. She understood that her talent was not just a gift, but a responsibility, an opportunity to connect and communicate in ways that transcended ordinary conversation. That night, she sat by her window, fingers hovering over the keys of her own piano, and played quietly for herself, savoring the memory of the day. The gentle introduction she had given had opened a door, and she could feel the promise of even greater things ahead. After her first gentle public performance, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, but she knew there was more she could explore. The experience had shown her that her music could reach beyond herself, but it also revealed a longing to challenge herself further. She wanted to understand the full potential of her talent, to see how far she could push the piano, and to discover what she was truly capable of. In the weeks following the small gathering, she spent long hours at the piano, revisiting the pieces she had played and experimenting with new ones. She allowed herself to take risks, trying faster passages, more complex harmonies, and unusual rhythms. Sometimes, she would make mistakes, notes clashing awkwardly or chords sounding off. But she no longer feared these moments. She understood that errors were part of growth, opportunities to learn and refine her skill. Her confidence began to grow steadily, no longer confined to private practice but blossoming into a readiness to share more of herself. One afternoon, a local music teacher noticed her talent through a brief introduction by a mutual acquaintance. The teacher invited her to play at a small recital, a slightly larger venue than the community center. This time, there would be more people, some of whom were experienced musicians. The thought was intimidating yet exciting. She spent days preparing, carefully selecting the pieces she would play and arranging them in a way that would tell a story. She focused on creating a balance between technical skill and emotional expression, wanting the audience to feel what she felt, rather than simply hear the notes. On the day of the recital, she arrived early and took a moment to breathe in the quiet of the empty hall. The room was larger than any she had played in before, with high ceilings and wooden panels that reflected sound beautifully. She sat at the piano, feeling a flutter of nerves, but also a sense of purpose. She reminded herself that she had prepared, that she knew the music intimately, and that she had the power to express herself. She allowed her fingers to rest lightly on the keys, connecting with the instrument as she always did, feeling the texture of the ivory and the coolness of the pedals beneath her feet. The audience began to enter, a mix of familiar faces and strangers, all curious to hear her play. The moment arrived, and she started with the soft, deliberate introduction she had practiced. The notes were gentle, inviting, and carefully measured, easing both herself and the listeners into the performance. At first, the audience responded politely, nodding in appreciation, listening with quiet interest. It was a familiar feeling, yet something felt different this time. The room seemed to hum with anticipation, as if aware that it was about to witness something extraordinary. As she moved through the first few pieces, she felt the music begin to flow more naturally. Her fingers glided across the keys with increasing assurance, and she allowed herself to explore dynamics she had only practiced in solitude. The gentle introduction gave way to a more expressive style, the notes growing bolder, richer, and more resonant. She felt the emotions inside her spilling into the music. Excitement, wonder, longing, and joy. Each chord and passage was no longer just an exercise. It was a declaration of her feelings, a conversation between her and the audience. A subtle change occurred in the room. Listeners began to lean forward, drawn into the performance. Some closed their eyes, lost in the sound, while others watched her intently, captivated by the transformation from timid beginnings to confident expression. She could sense the energy in the hall, the collective attention focused entirely on her and the piano. It was an electric moment, a silent acknowledgement that something remarkable was unfolding. She felt exhilarated and centered simultaneously, completely immersed in the music, aware of every nuance and resonance. As she reached the midpoint of her recital, she decided to take a bold step. She allowed the music to expand, exploring faster passages, intricate harmonies, and dramatic shifts in tempo. Her fingers moved with precision and freedom, dancing across the keys in a way that astonished even her. The audience reacted instinctively, a mixture of surprise and admiration on their faces. Some gasped softly at the unexpected complexity, while others smiled in delight at the beauty of the sound. She was no longer simply performing. She was sharing her essence, letting her true talent speak through every note. There were moments when she felt time slow down. Her heart and breath aligned with the rhythm, creating a sense of unity between herself, the piano, and the listeners. The music became a living entity, flowing through her, filling the hall, and connecting with each person in the audience. She realized that this was the magic she had always sensed, the power of music to communicate without words, to move people in ways that transcended ordinary experience. It was exhilarating, almost overwhelming, yet she remained focused and grounded, letting the emotions guide her fingers rather than control her. The contrast between the soft opening and the growing intensity became a story within itself. She could see the audience responding to each shift, their expressions changing with the music. The quiet moments allowed reflection, the louder passages brought excitement, and the intricate melodies demanded attention. It was a dance between restraint and freedom, and she navigated it with care and instinct. The piano was no longer a challenge to master. It was a partner in expression, helping her convey the depths of her feelings. As the recital progressed, she noticed a shift in herself. The nerves that had once gripped her completely vanished, replaced by a steady confidence. She felt in control yet liberated, able to take risks and explore the music fully. She began to experiment with improvisation, weaving in subtle variations and personal touches that were entirely her own. The audience, captivated by the authenticity of her playing, responded with murmurs of appreciation and soft applause between pieces. She understood that the connection she felt with the piano was now shared with them, a mutual experience that transcended words. Toward the end of her performance, she allowed the music to reach its peak. The notes became more powerful, the tempo more dynamic, and the melodies more expressive. Every key she pressed carried emotion. Every chord resonated with intention. The audience was fully engaged, some leaning forward in their seats, others closing their eyes to absorb the sound fully. It was a moment of triumph, a revelation not just of skill but of the depth of her talent and the authenticity of her expression. When the final note faded into silence, there was a brief pause before the hall erupted in applause. The sound was overwhelming yet gratifying, a confirmation that she had communicated something profound. She let herself breathe, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and awe at what had just occurred. She realized that the true power of her talent was not in the technical perfection of her playing, but in her ability to convey emotion, to connect with others, and to reveal herself through music. After the recital, people approached her, offering compliments and expressing how deeply they had been moved. Some spoke of being transported to memories or feelings they hadn't accessed in years. She listened humbly, feeling gratitude and amazement at the impact of her performance. It was an entirely different experience from practicing alone, yet it reinforced what she had always believed. Music was a bridge between hearts, and she had the ability to create that connection. Walking home later, she reflected on the journey of the past weeks. From a gentle introduction at a small gathering to a bold, expressive recital, she had discovered new dimensions of her talent. She felt a quiet excitement for the future, aware that this was only the beginning. The experience had taught her the value of courage, preparation, and emotional honesty. She understood that every step, every practice session, every note played in solitude had led to this moment of revelation. That night, as she sat at her piano in the quiet of her room, she played softly, replaying parts of the recital in her mind. The notes were not for an audience now but for herself, a way to savor and internalize the lessons learned. She felt a deep connection with her instrument and with the music itself, a bond strengthened by the knowledge that her talent could truly reach others. She knew that the next performance would bring new challenges, but she also knew she was ready to embrace them, confident in her growing ability and in the power of her authentic expression. The anticipation in the hall was palpable the moment she stepped onto the stage for her next performance. This time, the setting was larger, with a wider audience, but she felt a calm energy settle over her. She approached the piano slowly, her fingers hovering above the keys, feeling the cool touch of the ivory. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first note. She began as always, softly, allowing the music to start like a gentle wave, easing herself and the listeners into the experience. The notes were delicate, almost whispering, carrying the emotions she had nurtured quietly over years of practice. As she continued, her confidence grew steadily. The gentle introduction was no longer merely a precaution. It had become a ritual, a way to connect with the audience before letting her true abilities shine. She let her fingers move fluidly, the melodies unfolding naturally, expressing subtle joys and lingering sorrows. Each chord she struck was intentional, filled with depth and emotion. She noticed the audience leaning in, their eyes reflecting curiosity and attentiveness, some even closing their eyes to immerse themselves fully in the music. She felt the subtle connection forming between her and the listeners, a shared understanding that transcended words. Gradually, she began to expand the music, increasing the dynamics and intensity. Her fingers danced over the keys with a grace and precision that surprised even her, moving from soft, contemplative passages to faster, more dramatic sequences. The music began to take on a life of its own, echoing through the hall with richness and power. She felt every note, every chord, resonate within her, as if the piano itself were amplifying her emotions. The audience responded instinctively, a collective sense of awe and admiration rippling through the room. As the performance progressed, she allowed herself to explore the full range of her talent. The melodies soared, intertwining with complex harmonies, delicate trills, and bold, resonant chords. Her hands moved with purpose and freedom, each motion reflecting both skill and emotion. The music told a story, a narrative built on the foundation of her years of practice and her quiet perseverance. The audience was captivated, caught in the ebb and flow of her performance, experiencing the highs and lows, the tension and release, as if they were living the music themselves. There was a moment when she felt completely immersed, as if time had paused. Every note she played resonated deeply within her, and the audience seemed equally transported. She could sense the collective breath of the room, the way each listener leaned into the sound, fully engaged with the performance. The piano roared under her touch, not in volume alone but in the emotional weight it carried. She felt an exhilaration she had never known, a recognition of the true power of her talent and the impact it could have on others. Her playing became more expressive with each passing moment. She experimented with rhythm, with phrasing, with the intensity of each passage, creating contrasts that drew the audience further into the music. There were moments of quiet reflection, where the soft notes lingered in the air, and moments of dramatic flourish, where rapid passages cascaded like a waterfall. The hall seemed alive with sound, vibrating with the energy she poured into each phrase. She felt an overwhelming sense of freedom, of release, as the music allowed her to communicate emotions she had carried within herself for years. The audience's reactions were immediate and sincere. Some leaned forward, eyes wide with surprise, while others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them completely. There were small murmurs of admiration, sighs of awe, and even moments of visible emotion as the melodies touched hearts. She realized in that instant that her talent was not just a personal journey but a gift to share, a way to reach people in a profound and meaningful way. The connection between performer and listener was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the power of authentic expression. She allowed the performance to build to its climax, weaving together themes and motifs she had practiced and improvised, creating a tapestry of sound that was both technically impressive and deeply emotional. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, her body in perfect rhythm with the music. The piano roared beneath her touch, commanding attention, filling every corner of the hall with its resonance. It was a moment of total immersion, where the distinction between musician, instrument, and audience dissolved into pure experience. As the final section approached, she tempered the intensity with a careful return to softness. The music gradually faded, like the final rays of sunlight at the end of the day. She allowed the last notes to linger, gentle and reflective, creating a sense of closure and resolution. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat, caught in the beauty of what they had witnessed, before erupting into applause. The sound was overwhelming yet gratifying, a confirmation that the music had reached its intended depth, touching hearts and leaving an unforgettable impression. Afterward, people approached her with words of admiration and gratitude. Many expressed how profoundly moved they had been, some sharing personal stories of how the performance had resonated with them. She listened humbly, feeling a quiet pride and satisfaction. It was not just about skill or technique, but about the honesty and emotion she had poured into every note. The experience reinforced her understanding that music was a bridge, connecting souls, and that her talent had the power to create moments of shared beauty and understanding. Walking home that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet practice sessions in her small room to the gentle introductions at local gatherings, and finally to the powerful, expressive performance she had just delivered, she recognized the growth she had achieved. The experience had shown her that patience, dedication, and authenticity were essential in revealing one's true talent. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had shared a part of herself in a way that resonated with others. That night, she returned to her piano at home, playing softly for herself. The notes were not for an audience but for reflection, a way to internalize the lessons of the day. She allowed herself to explore further, trying new combinations of melody and harmony, feeling the continued growth of her skill and expression. The performance had not been the end, but a stepping stone, a confirmation of what she could achieve with courage and dedication. She felt ready to continue exploring, confident that her music had the power to reach hearts and touch lives in ways she had only begun to understand. After the powerful performance that had left the audience in awe, life began to change subtly but meaningfully for her. The recognition she received was not the loud, overwhelming fame of celebrities, but a steady acknowledgement of her talent and dedication. Invitations to play at various gatherings and small events started to come, each one offering an opportunity to share her music with new listeners. She approached each invitation thoughtfully, never rushing but carefully selecting occasions that felt meaningful. She wanted each performance to be authentic, a true reflection of her talent and emotion. She continued her daily practice, treating each session as both a refinement of skill and an exploration of expression. The piano remained her closest companion, the instrument through which she could communicate what she could not articulate with words. Her music became richer, more nuanced, and increasingly confident. She experimented with improvisation, blending classical pieces with her own interpretations, creating melodies that were deeply personal yet universally resonant. Each day at the piano was a journey, a way to continue discovering herself and the breadth of her abilities. As she played in new settings, she noticed how different environments influenced her music. In cozy living rooms, the intimacy allowed her to convey subtle emotions. In larger halls, she embraced expansive melodies and resonant chords that could fill the space and reach every listener. She learned to listen to the room as much as to the piano, adjusting her playing to match the mood and energy of the audience. It was a delicate balance, and mastering it became part of her growth as a musician. Each performance taught her something new, reinforcing the idea that talent was not just about technique but about connection and understanding. Her confidence in performing grew steadily. She no longer feared the audience or worried about mistakes. Instead, she focused on the experience of playing and the emotions she wanted to share. Mistakes, when they occurred, became part of the story, adding authenticity rather than detracting from the performance. She noticed that her listeners responded to sincerity, to the honesty of her expression, more than to technical perfection alone. This realization deepened her appreciation for music as a form of communication and reinforced her commitment to playing from the heart. In addition to performing, she began to mentor younger, aspiring musicians. She shared her experiences, offering guidance on how to approach practice, how to connect with music emotionally, and how to prepare for performances. She encouraged them to find their own voice, to embrace their unique style, and to understand that growth comes gradually. Teaching became another way for her to reflect on her journey, reminding her of how far she had come and inspiring her to continue evolving. She found joy in seeing others discover their passion, knowing that music could transform lives just as it had transformed hers. Over time, she began to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. She remembered the quiet hours of practice in her small room, the moments of doubt and hesitation, and the gradual growth that had led to her breakthrough performances. She appreciated the patience and persistence that had shaped her talent, understanding that every note played in solitude had contributed to her ability to express herself fully. The journey was as meaningful as the recognition she now received, and she carried that awareness with humility and gratitude. One evening, after a performance at a community center, she sat quietly by the piano, replaying the melodies in her mind. The audience had been moved, some even bringing tears to their eyes, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It was a reminder that music had the power to connect, to heal, and to inspire. She realized that her true accomplishment was not in applause or praise, but in the ability to touch hearts and create meaningful experiences. The recognition she received was a reflection of this connection, a confirmation that her music mattered beyond her own enjoyment. She also began to explore composing her own pieces more seriously. Drawing on the emotions and experiences she had accumulated over the years, she created original melodies that spoke of her journey, her observations, and her reflections on life. Each composition was a personal story, yet it carried a universal quality that allowed listeners to find their own meaning within it. Writing her own music became another form of self-expression, a way to leave a lasting imprint of her creativity. She approached it with the same dedication and authenticity that had guided her performances, ensuring that each piece was a true reflection of her talent and vision. With each new opportunity, she grew more comfortable stepping outside her comfort zone. She played in settings she had once found intimidating, embracing the challenge and learning from it. She realized that the fear she once felt was a natural part of growth, and overcoming it allowed her to reach new heights. Each performance, whether in front of a handful of people or a larger audience, became a chance to refine her skill, express her emotions, and connect with others. She approached each moment with focus, gratitude, and the understanding that her talent was both a gift and a responsibility. Her journey also deepened her appreciation for the support she had received along the way. Family, friends, mentors, and even casual listeners had played a role in encouraging her and providing opportunities to share her music. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the people who had recognized her potential and believed in her abilities. This acknowledgement inspired her to continue growing and to offer support to others whenever possible. She understood that talent thrives not in isolation, but in the context of community, connection, and shared experience. As her recognition continued to grow, she began to dream about the future. She envisioned playing in larger venues, collaborating with other musicians, and exploring new forms of expression. Yet, she remained grounded, remembering the quiet beginnings that had shaped her approach to music. She knew that authenticity, emotional honesty, and dedication were more important than fame or recognition. Her goal was not to impress but to communicate, to touch hearts, and to share the beauty and depth of music with as many people as possible. The journey had also taught her resilience. She had faced moments of doubt and hesitation, times when progress felt slow or uncertain. Yet, each challenge had strengthened her resolve and deepened her understanding of herself and her music. She learned to embrace the process, to appreciate the small victories, and to trust that persistence would lead to growth. This resilience extended beyond her music, influencing her approach to life and relationships, giving her confidence to face challenges with grace and patience. Ultimately, she realized that her talent was more than just skill with an instrument. It was a reflection of her dedication, her emotions, and her journey of self-discovery. Each performance, each composition, each shared moment of music was a testament to the power of perseverance, authenticity, and passion. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there would always be new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to grow. And she embraced it fully, knowing that every step, every note, and every connection was part of a meaningful and beautiful life shaped by music. Sitting alone by her piano one night, she played softly, letting the melodies flow naturally. The music carried the essence of her experiences, her emotions, and her reflections. It was not about performing for an audience, not about recognition or applause. It was about expression, about connection, and about honoring the journey that had brought her to this point. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that her talent had grown, her voice had found its power, and her music had the ability to move and inspire. In that quiet moment, she understood that she had discovered not only her true talent, but also the joy and purpose of sharing it with the world.